Ahead on Brevard Watch. Well, you hear it all the time. If schools don't think they get enough tax money, they should try some fundraising before asking for more. We'll talk to a leader who's trying. What's the latest news in the city of Melbourne? We'll ask the mayor. And who says there's no religion in public schools today? We'll take you inside a faith-based effort that has changed lives at a school in Cocoa and a church on Merritt Island. This is Brevard Watch, the news experience focused exclusively on Florida's Space Coast. My thanks to Community Credit Union for sponsoring this episode of Brevard Watch. In the studio with me today is Mike LaFortune, chairman of the Brevard Schools Foundation. That's the nonprofit group that does private fundraising to advance education on the Space Coast. Mike is also the director emeritus of the Brevard Cultural Alliance. He's a graduate of the Florida Institute of Technology, where he earned degrees in physics and applied mathematics. And before that, he graduated from Satellite High School. Go Scorps. Mike, thanks for joining us in this studio. One of the biggest headlines out this week is what may be in store for Brevard Public Schools and all school districts when it comes to the budget. Tallahassee sets the taxing and spending for all school districts in Florida. The governor and other leadership in Tallahassee are talking about perhaps rolling back taxes, cutting taxes again, keeping things potentially flat. Another flat year for Brevard Public Schools. And you hear it all the time. If educators don't feel like they're getting enough money from Tallahassee, they ought to try going out and doing some private fundraising before they ask for more tax dollars. That seems to be where the foundation comes in sometimes. What do you make of that?
Absolutely. So thanks for having me. First of all, Matt, appreciate that. And thanks for allowing me to talk a little bit about Brevard Schools Foundation, because what we do is to fill education and funding gaps for our students and teachers in Brevard County. And so when we see dynamics at the state level with the budget, and we understand that there are perhaps teachers facing headwinds for having the supplies they need in their classrooms, teachers feeling like they're not supported for innovation in the classroom. Maybe they have a bright idea and they want to see that materialized. And we see families who have maybe an unfair share amount of struggle, an economic challenge, and they need support to get through and to be successful. These students need our support. And so that's where the foundation comes in. So when we see a dynamic like a flat or a shrinking budget at the state level, really what that means to us is to kind of buckle up, right? Because we know there's going to be an increased need. Not to mention other dynamics that are happening around the same time, like lately we've had an influx of hurricane displaced people, hurricane refugees from Puerto Rico, U.S. Virgin Islands, Florida, Texas, I think even Georgia. So we have all of these dynamics coming at the same time. And when the public monies aren't there, or they can't reach into some of those corners where we still need service, that's where the foundation comes in. And so, for example, the Brevard Schools Foundation, we will support teachers who've got bright ideas. You talk about, keeping teachers engaged as part of your question there. That we want to help those teachers who've got bright ideas to be able to implement them. And so we have a program at the foundation called the Bright Ideas Classroom Grant. It's a competitive grant, so the teachers have to articulate the outcome they want. They have to make a compelling case for it. So they have that skin in the game. And when they come out of that, if they're awarded the grant, and it's reviewed by individuals in the community, typically business people or folks who've got a perspective and keen judgment for an investment, and when they come out of that, then we've seen some tremendous results. We've seen engaged students. We've seen teachers who are more fired up, who feel like they're supported by their community. And there's one example that, in fact, I had shared recently with the state legislature. I went up to the State Board of Education and had the chance to speak with them and talked about an example in Brevard County here where there was a teacher who was respected among her peers, was impactful in her classroom, and it had this idea about doing more to affect the entire grade, and she was a fifth grade teacher. And so she wrote a Bright Ideas Classroom grant, which she won, and it applied to science education across all the fifth grade. And this particular school, the year prior, had about a 50% pass rate on their science for fifth graders. And after going through this program and getting some additional supplies, some things to take home, some different strategies for engaging different kids across the grade, then they moved in 1 year from around 50% to almost 75%. I think we might have
Wow.
exceeded 75%. And it was the biggest gain in the year in Brevard County. And we can directly attribute that to not only the money and the grant, but that empowerment, that small amount of money. It ended up being $1,500. So for $1,500, we changed the outcomes for basically a grade of students for that community, that entire cohort of those students.
That's big news for a city.
Huge, and under a very small investment. So, as a private citizen, when I hear stories like that, I think, okay, where do I sign up, right? What can I do? So when I see that our teachers are feeling like, where's the love, right? When they see that,
Right.
then I think that's where, as a community, it's in our interest to support our teachers, and the foundation provides a mechanism for that. That's one of many, but that's a mechanism for the community, for private individuals, for corporations to become involved.
You mentioned something about the supply zone.
Yes.
I think there was some news coverage of that this year. There was some kind of $1 million mark that it hit, or some milestone that happened. Talk about that. What is the
Sure.
supply zone?
Yeah, so the supply zone for teachers is our free store. So the Brevard Schools Foundation manages a store like Office Depot or any other store that has supplies, and a substantial library. And it's available for teachers across Brevard County, and it focuses on the schools of highest need. So right now, about 1/3 of those schools where they have a higher proportion of students with higher economic need, those teachers can come in and shop for free. And the average cart value they leave with is around $200 to $300. So, and these are monies that very typically these teachers, we know, would pay out of pocket because they see a student in the classroom who doesn't have a backpack, who doesn't have the paper, the crayons, the supplies they need. Just like you and I go to work and we have to have the supplies we need, maybe it's a laptop, maybe it's a phone, maybe it's just the clothes we wear. These students don't always have that or can't rely on it.
Right.
And so the free store is meant to backstop that, the supply zone for students, for teachers. So the supply zone for teachers is available to all teachers in the county if they volunteer. So for other schools, someone says, I really want to get in there, and I'd like to trade some time for resources instead of paying for resources. We have that option as well for teachers. But an example of something an important milestone, we only opened it around a little over 3 years ago, we opened the supply zone. And we weren't creating a new model, but we wanted to do it really well, and we wanted to do it, frankly, we wanted to punch above our weight, like we do so much in Brevard. And within 2 years, we had garnered national recognition, and we went from getting donations that were coming on pallets sometimes from organizations to container trucks full
Wow.
of donations. And that allowed us to scale up the amount of impact that we had. And within about 3 years, again, maybe a little less than 3 years, we had hit the $1 million mark. So earlier this year, we had a celebration for a shopper that came through, and it was kind of like an Oprah moment. We had the shopper that came through, and she was our $1 million shopper. And it was pretty exciting, right? So I hope we have some footage maybe from that so people can see how exciting that was for that teacher. But that's out there. And we have other stories of teachers who are incredulous that the community has come out in this way to support them. Teachers that go to the supply zone and are even a little worried to take things, even a little feel self-conscious to take something. And we encourage them to bring these back in their classroom, and they share these stories with us about how much of an impact it's made to students who maybe don't have a book at home. And now through the supply zone, they have that book. Maybe a student who's got a hand-me-down backpack that's failing, and now that student has a new backpack through the supply zone. It's also the host location for our back-to-school supply drive. So people who want to give during the summer, so these families in need can have get the year started with the supplies they need. That's where we do our back-to-school supply drive. And about 2,000 families every year benefit from that. And then lastly, we use that as a location for things like for the homeless liaisons. And so for homeless families, which we have many of throughout Brevard County, actually a growing number in our schools, they use the supply zone as a location for the services and for donations and things like that. So it's not just school supplies, but it's hygiene, sometimes even clothing and other things that the supply zone provides.
You have something called Take Stock in Children.
Yes.
What is that?
So Take Stock in Children is a statewide program. It's about 20 years old. And the Brevard Schools Foundation is the local affiliate. So we manage Take Stock in Children for Brevard County. And it's a program that was originally for dropout prevention. So we found there's students within our communities at all schools in our community who, through no fault of their own, were dealt a stacked deck, right? They've got these economic challenges, maybe they've got family challenges, and we know from those indicators that they as a cohort have a lower likelihood of graduation.
So they're poor.
They're poor, and
They
they
may
may
have
have
a parent
other
who's disabled, so they have to work during the day to
Right.
support the family.
Exactly, and so we identify these students, these students with the need, and what we know about them is they're at all schools. We know that they face about a 30% dropout rate, so about 70% graduation rate. And so what we do is we offer this program called Take Stock in Children, and there are three primary components. One is the student is required themselves to maintain a reasonable GPA. The student is paired with a mentor from the community, and that student and mentor meet on a periodic basis and go along. It's kind of a coach, almost like a life coach along the way. They meet on campus. And the third aspect is at the end of this, the student has a Florida prepaid scholarship waiting for them. So 2 years of post-secondary education are paid for.
Wow.
And with those three components, we change lives and we change the vector for these families. A lot of these kids are first generation to get post-secondary education. 100% of the students that come through this program graduate. You know, in recent years, we were in the 90s, now we're up to 100%. And the majority of them, something like 95%, go on to choose post-secondary education in pursuit of a college degree. Though they can use that post-secondary education for vocational, they can go into the workforce. But what I see is, I've seen the kids come in, middle schoolers who are wide-eyed, and they come from all communities in our district, and the only thing that unites them is, as a cohort, in aggregate, and we put them through this function, which is the Take Stock program, and 100% of them come out, and they come out amazing people. They come out people who you want to have speak at your Rotary Club. They're the students that you want to hire as soon as they're out of high school and as soon as they're out of college. So we really do change lives through that program, and we're honored to be the affiliate for that. Now, I will say that as well as it's running, we only bring in maybe 60 to 70 students a year, depending on what finances allow in a given year. And currently, we have 200 students on the wait list. So there's a lot more need than we have capacity to serve. And if I may, something that if your listeners are interested, something that we need for Take Stock in Children is, while we always can use more resources and volunteering, we really need mentors.
Oh.
So we need people who have the ability and the interest to engage with these young people, to change the direction of these young people and their families. We coach the mentors. We set them up for success. We pair them with people in our foundation so we make sure that they're successful, give them the support they need, and they change the lives of these students.
Now, I know that the foundation raises money a lot of other philanthropies do. Mm-hmm. You have fundraisers, you go to corporate donors, and they come by sometimes with big checks for programs, and you take pictures, and it's all very, very nice. What do you find is the biggest challenge when it comes to fundraising?
So the biggest challenge for fundraising for Brevard Schools Foundation for us has been awareness. We're a 30-year-old organization, and we have deliberately been, I don't want to say a silent partner, but a partner who's a service partner to the district, to our students, our teachers, and our schools. And so for a long time, it was about the work, more so than about the story. And so people who knew and organizations who knew worked with the foundation, in part because we are the direct support organization for schools. So if an organization or a person wants to give substantially to a school, it comes through the foundation.
Right.
But in terms of community awareness, that really wasn't our motive. We were there to serve, not to be known for our service. And as I think about as a business person, I think about maturity models. You know, we'd kind of crossed that part. We've proved that the foundation changes lives, right? And we have the ability to engage our community, and we have the ability to support innovation in our classrooms. And so over this more recent period, really just this last year, we've started raising awareness, and we've changed how we engage with our community to tell the story of the foundation. And I'll give you an example. I work a lot personally with groups who support economic development, right? We're trying to attract new businesses. We're trying to retain and grow the businesses we have. We want an inspired and inspiring workforce here in the community. And one of the things that's very powerful towards those ambitions is great schools. And so we've got that story. It says, hey, our schools are great. And we've got the story that in the past, our schools were greater good. So we've got this tradition of greatness in education, and it's getting better. But as a business person, that doesn't tell me enough, I think, to make a bet on the future sometimes. Just because it seems to be trending well, you're asking me to assume that it's going to be good in the future. So how do we give some evidence to that, to people who are asking to make a bet to move here or to move their business here? And one of the ways we do that is to tell the story of the foundation. Because the foundation represents what the community cares, the community's engagement with education. So it's not just about having great teachers, which we have, or a great superintendent, which we have, great district staff, but it's about how the community is engaged with education so that we have that, and I know it's a pun, but we have that foundation for educational sustainability and success long term. And so I think the biggest challenge we have is telling that story so that people understand that our schools aren't great by accident. They're great because the people in our community who work for the district and the people in our community who care about education have these ways to engage.
When we come back, Melbourne City Hall sets its sights on redeveloping south of downtown.
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.
This is Brevard Watch. I'm Matt Reed. We'll talk more with today's guest, Mike LaFortune, about schools, tourism, and the arts in just a moment. But first, listen to what Melbourne Mayor Kathy Meehan told me about the latest developments in her city. You talked at a chamber event about some big things going on at the Melbourne airport, including the tower. Fill us in.
Yes, it's the Orlando-Melbourne Air Traffic Control Tower. It's being built right now, and you'll probably seen it if you drive on NASA. But it's, over 51 years old is the old one. So it's going to have the latest technology, and I'm excited because we're going to use Harris Corporation as one of our main vendors who will supply the technology in that tower. So we're real excited about that.
No more dial-up internet.
No dial-up. And there was a group of women that toured the old one, and I was just, amazed that we had to climb the stairs. They did dial-up. While the small plane was flying in, we all had to duck, and because they had to see everything, and it was, oh, wow, we're going to have to work on this.
Time capsule.
Yeah, that's what
Control tower from another era.
Yeah.
But passenger traffic sounds like it's doing well.
Yes, passenger traffic is doing well. Porter Airlines loves Melbourne. They already had a flight coming in from Toronto, but they're adding more flights this year. And it will be Ottawa and Windsor, Ontario. So we're excited to have them here in Melbourne.
What else is going on in Melbourne that is newsworthy, or projects that you're working on right now?
Another project is the development on US 1 that used to be the Jim Rathman property, and the city owned it 2 or 3 years ago, and we found that we had to sell it to a developer who's going to do exactly what we like them to do, which is a high-end hotel with retail space. It will have moorings so that you can bring your boat in and visit the restaurant. So it's going to have all those.
It's right on the waterfront?
And it's on the waterfront, right across from a car dealership now. So we had to take down the old structure that was housing the boats years ago, and because of Irma, it kind of leaned, and so we had to get a contractor in and tear it down. So now you drive by and it's, wow, you're so used to this building, and now it's beautiful on the river. So that's great. Downtown Melbourne, of course, is doing great. Ocean Crush 11 is coming into downtown, so everybody's excited about that. We have a new country bar. Hurricane Creek is moving in, and they're open. So there's a lot of good, and of course we have a lot of shops in downtown. So I see a lot of tourists out. And people coming back that used to live in Melbourne years ago, telling us how Melbourne has changed so much, and they just love it.
One of the things that I've thought about a little bit in my role with Brevard Public Schools is, boy, if we could really put some TLC into the schools that are in that area, how much more desirable a place to live it might be.
Yes.
Places like University Park, Stone Middle School, Palm Bay High School. How would you characterize the City of Melbourne's relations with its school system and Brevard Public Schools?
Definitely like to embrace. We want to educate our young people of city government and how we operate. And we'd like our young people to step up and tell us what they think. So, you know, I will be going out there talking with them. I do go attend graduations, Palm Bay High School, Melbourne High School, and O'Galley. So I do attend those graduations. I think it's important for government to be in a partnership with the community and the schools. So.
One of the issues, just kind of a fun, but I guess it's a little bit of a scary issue for the people involved, is that Green Gables house that's on US 1. Yes. Historic property, this nonprofit group rushing to try to raise money to save that house. But has the city been supportive of that effort, or?
We are certainly supportive, not financially, but we do support the historic Green Gables house. I think it is important for our community. I'm just waiting on, you know, for them to reach out.
Right.
I think they have this year to raise a lot of money. So I'm trying to get the word out, but.
You're ready to do zoning and permitting and
Yes.
things like that a city can do, but
Yes.
it really is a private property. And
That's right, yeah. So I do wish them well, and I do support the historic building.
Mary Meehan, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Thank you so much.
Mike, one part of the fun of this program is that we can do like a mashup of ideas, get somebody in from one background and you ask them about something else going on in the community. Mm-hmm. You're easy because you have so many different things in your background. Most recently, some involvement with the Brevard Cultural Alliance and local arts. You know where the tourist tax dollars go, and you probably have a take on how things work here in Brevard County. I want to get your sense of, you know, some of the ideas that we've had for tourist tax dollars. You know, there's a 5 cents per dollar tax on hotel rooms. The money comes in and it goes a lot of different places. Recently, 2 Brevard leaders have begun proposing maybe using some of that money for sewer upgrades to help the Indian River Lagoon. There are more ideas out there. How important are these dollars to local arts groups and some of the other places where the money goes?
Yeah, so the tourism development tax, the way I look at it, and I have maybe my own take on this, but I look at it as it's an investment in our future. So we've got something that we know matters. We've been intentional about it, tourism, right? And it's important to our economy. And so if we can reinvest some of that intentionally in the things that we need to continue to grow that aspect of our economy, particularly in ways that improve our quality of life here locally, things that a community wants, then I think that's a good thing. So just as a fundamental statement, I'm a supporter of reinvestment of our dividends, and I think that's what the tax represents. Is the dollar that the visitor comes in with, we're going to reinvest a portion of that to continue our operations as an attractive destination. As to where that goes, I think that's a matter of robust debate. I think as a community, I think we get to choose what we want to be when we grow up next. And I think we need to look at what are those things that attract visitors. People come from different reasons, right? The lagoon's a big draw, our beaches are a draw. We have some important threads around cultural destination, right? So these aspects, I think, are worthy of support. And I think at any given time in our development as a county, I think it's worthy of debate what those things are. What I think is also important is, as a community, we've supported some things over generations, years or decades, that speak to the values that we hold consistently as a county. And that includes the arts. The county has had an aspect of supporting the arts and to using some public monies as a force multiplier, often for private monies, so that we can seed things that then can, through volunteerism, through public-private partnership, can get other funding and support. Not really meant to ride out just on the public nickel, but to use that as seed capital, if you will. And I think that as a community, it's important for us to not be the ones to vote in a way or to zero out something that all the people before us and the success we've enjoyed in the county that we've built over this time, that would send a signal to future generations or to visitors or people who are looking at our community to say, we don't care about this. And I think that's really an important concept, is this idea of if you zero something out or take such a substantial cut out of something as to effectively cut the legs out, to gut something, it sends a signal to those who watch to say, Brevard County doesn't care about that. Clearly, we vote with those public dollars. And so I think that's really important. And I know some of the reasons that we've done things like look at arts programs or programs for senior care or other things, because when we think, wow, we need to spend tens of millions, maybe hundreds of millions in terms of infrastructure, certainly in aggregate, as much or more in aggregate across Brevard County, how do you then justify? How do you defend saying, well, we need to spend $50,000 over here or $150 on some program? And I think you also have to think about that 50 or 150 might be what keeps a particular strand of work, an important strand of work in our community afloat. And that 50 or 150, or I'm making up these numbers, what that is, maybe a drop in the bucket, maybe a rounding error for some of the other investments we have to make. So I would say, I hope that we don't get distracted by ideas around things that are really important for us, and we get distracted about using maybe a tool that may not be the right tool for it. That, in other words, let's think about finding revenue in ways that's sustainable and local, not only local to Brevard, but local to the issue at hand. For example, if I was going to be funding the schools, I might think to myself, is there a way that I can have visitors who come to my community help fund our schools? Not in a way that would diminish our visitors, not in a way that would right. send the visitors away, but could I find a way that I could take some visitor revenue and pay for our schools through that? That way, as a citizen, I'm getting some more value on my dollar. And those people who worked on the sales tax for the schools to help with some of the capital expenditure gaps and revenue gaps a few years ago, that was some of the thinking at the time, so that we could use sales tax that visitors pay, not just on the backs of locals, not just on the backs of property tax.
Well, you're involved in the school foundation now, but you were involved in the Cultural Alliance, and I know that there are so many different ways that so many different things that we consider to be art and culture, whether it's the zoo, it's museums, theater.
Yep.
There's painting is art, but so is a festival, perhaps, or an aquarium.
Right.
Maybe not art, but it's cultural in a way. What you're saying is there ought to be at least a piece of what comes in that sustains those things while we are still focusing on the great big priorities, I don't know, like roads or sewer projects.
Right.
Okay.
Absolutely. I agree with that. And I think I had an example. I was taking a local architect from a company, Mel D, down in O'Galley Arts District, and we were going to a Brevard Schools Foundation meeting at the Supply Zone, in fact. And as we're driving along a road in Cocoa on our way, there's a water main that's just gushing. It's just going. And for me, that was a really interesting moment, that here I'm going to introduce this person to the foundation and what we do to support our schools, and over here, water's pouring out of the road. Right, and so you have to. The answer is you have to do both. I think there's a false either or in this. We just need to be intentional about what we want to be when we grow up next in the county, and we need to think about how we find sustainable funding for that.
What do you make of downtown O'Galley today?
I love it. I love downtown O'Galley.
I mean, it's changing a lot just in the last year or two. There's some new projects on the books.
I'm really impressed with downtown O'Galley, or the O'Galley Arts District, or EGAD. You'll see those names. I'm really impressed with their velocity right now. I think that's been an idea that's been around for a while. There was that local reinvestment through the CRA, right? And so there was this idea of, okay, let's try to do something as a greater community. Let's focus our resources and localize some of those resources so that we can achieve what we want. And that was an arts district, right? So it had vectors of a Main Street element to it. It had a community redevelopment aspect to it. It had an arts aspect to it. And like anything, it's like a flywheel. It takes some time to get going. You keep putting energy into it, but it takes a while to get going. And what I feel like I'm seeing now as a citizen, I live across the bridge, but I see velocity there. I see that it looks like they're going. I'm really excited about their anti-gravity project. That's just kicking off in a couple weeks. It's kind of kicked off, but it's officially in a couple weeks on Black Friday. And then it wraps up, I think it's the first weekend in December.
Anti-gravity project.
Yeah.
What is that?
So Anti-Gravity is a project in EGAD to introduce, to build upon what they already have for public art. So muralists, and there's 3 strands of muralists. There's a muralists who are world class, really. So the best of the best, having these muralists participate. And then there's a third of the work that'll be produced by local artists. So we want to have that local component of local muralists. And then the other third is community art. And so these will be pieces that'll be coached, kind of semi-put together by the artists so that there's some framing, but the community comes and gets to contribute. And I'll tell you, as someone who's been a part of community builds, I was part of putting together parts of our Brevard Zoo, that's legacy. And I've been a part of Brevard Cultural Alliance when we've done artist in residency events when artists have come into schools and worked with students to produce something that's world class. That's legacy. And when you have a leave behind like visual arts, I'm a big fan of performing arts, but visual arts has some advantages in terms of that permanence, that when you have that, then those people grow up, and whether they move on or they stay in community, that's legacy. They get excited about, I did that.
Now
and I do that.
landmark.
I do that with my son. If we go to the zoo, I say, and I point to a tree, and before I can finish my sentence, my son will say, "Yeah, Dad, I know you planted that tree. You told me 1,000 times you planted that tree." But he gets it. He gets that that's important, and I think that's. So I'm really pleased with the Anti-Gravity project. I think they're going to get great art out of it, and they're going to be able to feature local artists, and they're going to have that community piece. So I think that the programming is innovative. I think the offer's great, and I'm really pleased with what's going on in EGAD.
There's an edge to it, and it seems like the feel of the place now, even on a Friday night,
Yes.
you see people walking.
Yes.
The street going from one place to the next. There's
Yes.
some funky, I don't know if they're stores or they are galleries or what they are, but people are going in and looking around and
They
and
defy
saying,
labels.
Yeah, I don't know. It's got a cool factor to it now
Yeah.
that seems to be a product of momentum, I think is the way
Yes.
you describe it.
Yes, and I think I love going to downtown Melbourne. I love going to Cocoa Village. I love going to downtown Titusville. I love going to Cocoa Beach. Right. So these areas where we've made those investments, it's not a coincidence. We've made those investments where we've been intentional. We have those kinds of outcomes. And as a citizen, I love it. And I think that, my hope in the long term is this is also going to create more mass for destination, right? It's going to pull people in and fund more of those tourism tax dollars that we've been talking about. I think it's a virtuous cycle, and I'm really glad that other people are working hard to make that happen.
When we come back, what's the best way for Brevard to get what it needs from the state legislature? And we show you what inspired a church in Merritt Island to adopt a public school in Cocoa.
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.
Well, the Schools Foundation isn't the only organization stepping up to help our kids. Churches are doing it too, and it's legal, and it's awesome. Check out this video report by Rachel Horst about a mission by Georgiana United Methodist Church on Merritt Island to adopt Cambridge Elementary School in Cocoa.
It started at a business recognition luncheon when Pastor Corky Calhoun and I just happened to be sitting next to each other. And we began to talk about schools. Corky's wife is a teacher, and his boys went through Brevard Public Schools. And his church, Georgiana, was involved at some other Merritt Island schools. And we just talked through the luncheon and agreed we'd like to talk again and work together. And at that time, I did not realize Corky was already developing a vision.
Since being a principal here at Cambridge, Diana and Chris have come to me and said, okay, we have a spring break project. What are your visions? What are your goals? And with Abby Turner and I, we sit down with them. And my goal for Cambridge is to be a home away from home for the students, and Georgiana has jumped on that.
Every year, they not only support the teachers and the students, but they help our campus. This year they did a spring break beautification project. They did one last year. They supply backpacks full of supplies for students. This year they donated 2,000 embroidered polos so that students could have fresh uniforms. They always have the teacher's lounge stocked with K-cups and coffee, so that really helps with morale. I mean, I can't even begin to express how many thousands of hours volunteers from Georgiana donate to Cambridge, and they're just really here for us, just to keep our spirits up.
I'm telling you, it's going to change your church. It's going to change your church. I think it creates community, and it creates a single focus mission. Whether it's a financial gift or it's a time gift, you know, the church gives away its resources, its time, and its heart. And so when you do those three things, it just makes the world a better place. That's what we believe.
Well, the partnership has grown just like a normal relationship has grown. It starts small in the beginning and you build a bond, and that bond keeps getting stronger and stronger and stronger. And more members are coming to serve our students. You know, it takes a village to raise a child, and they've become one of our village members, and we raise the children of Cambridge Elementary School together.
We have blessed those at Cambridge and in that community and the teachers, but our people have been greatly blessed. And, you know, they have given, but they've also received. And so I would just recommend to anyone, you know, there's so many people that have a need out there and so many people that just need to be loved on. And we can be the hands and feet of Christ. We don't ever have to speak words from the Bible to anyone, but we can just go and we can love and be a presence. And it just changes lives.
Children are the most important thing, you know, to the Lord and to us. And I think that if we don't invest in them early, then they're not going to know what it looks like to have good role models. And so I think to have, you know, extra hands and feet on the ground and loving the kids the way that they should be loved is so huge. And if you don't start that early, then they don't know what that looks like. And so I think that it's just so good to implement it at an early age.
I was working in class and I was helping them with, I think, a reading assignment, and they were in between, and you know, a little girl comes over and says, "You're just like my dad." And so I thought, oh, that's so sweet. I mean, you know, honey, that's cute. And then I thought, man, I better check and see what kind of dad she has. So I was like, well, is your dad a nice guy? And she says, I don't know my dad. He passed away when I was a baby. That's why you're like my dad. And it just took my heart, and I thought, all right, it's worth 100 hours to come and do this. And she's precious, and she just wants somebody to love her. I think a lot of people are afraid to get involved, and they're not quite sure how. But I think if you called a local school and said, listen, we've got 3 or 4 people who would like to volunteer, they will be all over that.
Well, all a faith-based organization needs to do is call the school, and the school will direct them to the partner and education coordinator. So for Cambridge, that is me. And really, we get the conversation going, and we talk about the different things that we're looking for in a relationship, and it grows from there.
Both Chris and Diana, I'll come down, I'll sit in a meeting, I'll go, gosh, this is what we need to do. And the next thing you know, they're all over it and they're making it happen. So like in all good organizations, healthy organizations, it's a team effort. And so it's not anything that I've done on my own. It's been a great staff and an amazing, giving, generous church that has loved its community.
It grew out of that luncheon, and we laugh sometimes about how glad we are we got to sit next to each other. It was completely by chance, or maybe not.
This is Brevard Watch. I'm Matt Reed. We'll go into more depth in just a moment with Brevard Schools Foundation Chairman Mike LaFortune. But in case you missed it on Brevard Watch, we talked recently with 2 people in local politics about the best way to persuade state lawmakers to support education. Check out what political consultant Kendall Moore and school board chair Misty Belford had to say about that.
One of the things, I'd love both of your takes on this, that I have heard ever since I started working in Brevard County, is that if we don't have enough money to do something, be it build a new school, or pay teachers more, or start a new program of some type, is you need to hit your legislators harder, shame them into spending more on public schools. Is that the right way to go? I hear it a lot. Kendall, you're a political expert. Does it work?
I'm not sure shaming is the word that I would use, but I think advocacy is a tough business, and when you have citizen-based groups, and I'm certainly, the school board enjoys one thing. You have this great asset, called the community's children, and so you're bargaining on behalf of something that's extremely important. So whether it's, children or animals or whatever, the beach, whatever your issue may be, hardcore advocacy of community people spending time and putting pressure on those legislators, educating them. You do a great job of that here with data-driven analysis that says, we want you to do this, here's why, here's how it makes a difference. So I wouldn't use the word shaming, but, hard-pressed advocacy. You always have a competing interest on the other side. And so that someone's pushing in the other direction that may not want to see that as a spending priority. And so pushing hard, data-driven, well thought out, well put together, I think that forces the legislator to listen.
Sure, somebody doesn't want their sales taxes to increase. Somebody doesn't want their property taxes potentially to go up. That is a competing interest for a lot of people, and it's something that I think people in Tallahassee have to square. Speaking of squaring, Misty, you heard that what Kendall just said. How do you square that with the approach that the board and Dr. Blackburn have taken?
Sure. So you may be familiar with the King Center event.
Yes.
It was well before my time. But
I was there.
You were there. Excellent.
Were you there, Kendall?
I was there.
Okay. Yes, it is legend.
So when I came on the board in Brevard County and started meeting with our legislators, one of the first things that I heard was King Center. And I can tell you that that was, in my opinion, shaming and pushing really hard. And I think that it was very detrimental to Brevard County. We are just now at the point where we're starting to build positive relationships with our legislators, and every single time we have had interaction with them, we still hear about the King Center. So I think it's a fine line that we have to walk between advocating strongly, as Mr. Moore indicated, and not crossing the line to the point that we turn them against us. I feel like right now we're in a pretty good place with our legislative delegation in Brevard County. We have rebuilt that relationship. They're listening to us. It takes time, and I'm not the most patient person in the world. I want things to happen right now. But at the same time, I do feel like we are moving in the right direction with them. And we have to stay strong, and we have to advocate strongly with our legislators. But I think we also have to do it in a professional, respectful, collaborative manner.
Mike, off the air, you mentioned the total number of Puerto Rican students, not Puerto Rican necessarily, but number of students that are winding up in Brevard Public Schools as a result of being displaced by hurricanes someplace. What was it, about 120, 140?
Right. So the latest numbers that I'm aware of for the number of hurricane-displaced students, so you could call them refugees, storm refugees, but hurricane-displaced students in our school system is up to 151 at the last count. And you figure that these are the recent storms, right? Mm-hmm. These were the storms that we were boarding up for, or the storms that we were watching, if depending on where they were, and it wasn't that long ago. So these were students who last year were on their track at their school. That's right. What their life was going to be. They could imagine the fall that was coming, and now they've got something completely different, and they've got a pretty tough deal. And so often they've left behind all or most of their possessions, and they're now trying to start a new life here in Brevard. And these students are trying to keep their education rolling, so they don't lose a year. They don't lose that engagement, and it's so important for our students. And so for those 150 plus students that we have that are in that boat right now, the supply zone for teachers has ramped up services to be able to help. And there's lots of other agencies that are helping as well. Like I spoke to someone last night from Family Promise that have seen some influx from this. So Brevard is responding. But in the case of Brevard Schools Foundation, what that means is the district didn't have all these resources just sitting around benched for these people to come in. So the foundation ramped up as a partner to the district, as a service organization to the district, to now make supplies available to these students. So if they need backpacks, if they need school supplies, if they need clothing in some cases, we have those available, and we've been engaged. And our school store supply zone manager, Elizabeth Schreiber, has been leading that effort. And she's working with agencies from Puerto Rico, from the U.S. Virgin Islands. I mean, it's not just about getting supplies to the students, but it's this coordinated effort across a large geography, and it's run out of our foundation. It's run out of the supply zone. So, we've got world-class people who are doing great work and who've stepped up to a surprise.
You grew up poor.
Yes.
You told me once that you came up with not a lot of means.
Yep.
And today it has affected your outlook. Tell us a little bit about your upbringing and where you came from.
Sure. So I've been in Florida most of my life. I've had the privilege of living in other states, the choice of living in other states and living in other countries. But I came back to Brevard because I love Brevard and I love Florida. But when I was a young person in Florida, I lived in a little town called Williston, Florida, outside of Gainesville. We only had about 2,000 people in the town at the time. And we lived in a trailer. It would be generous to call it a mobile home, but it was a trailer in the woods, and I had a few books and a few toys and things like that. Lots of dogs and lots of woods around me. And what I saw at the time, my mom was working multiple jobs to make ends meet and to help advance us, and she did a great job at that. But one of the jobs she had was as a substitute teacher sometimes, and so I would see her go to school. And come back with these stories in my classroom and others that made me aware at a young age that even though I knew I was conscious of being poor, I knew that there were poorer kids. And we were in a de facto segregated South. This was the 70s in rural Florida, and there were 2 schools, even in a town as small as ours. And my school was the school that was more economically advantaged, realistically. And so at a very young age, I was aware that, okay, I'm at the school that's got more advantages, and I've still got kids who are poorer than me, and I'm pretty poor. And so that stuck with me early on. And now when I speak to people in our community, and I speak as a representative of the foundation, as someone who shares my time to help our kids, when I tell them the facts of the needs in Brevard, people are often surprised. Even when I joined the foundation, I wasn't aware initially that over 50% of students in Brevard County are on free or reduced lunch. Over half. We have 72,000 learners in our 73,000 learners in our system, and over half of them are on free and reduced lunch. And that this need is at every school in the district. 82 schools, they all have these students who have needs. They have homeless families, homeless students in these schools, in our schools. So that's that piece of it that for me was there's more need than you're aware of. Just be aware of that. And so that was the lesson that I left when I was young enough to sort of experience that. That's the lesson I gained.
So let's break some news here. What's next for the Brevard Schools Foundation?
So a couple things happen in the Brevard Schools Foundation to share. So right now we have our Bids for Kids auction going on. It's an online auction. You've got things from restaurant gift certificates donated by local partners all the way up to experiences like spending time with an astronaut, a trip to Fiji, parasailing, all these kinds of things, these unique experiences. Tickets to a Jaguars game, to a Tampa Bay Rays game. I mean, so we got all different kinds of things. There's something on the auction for everyone. They're all at very good prices, and I encourage folks to go check it out. And they can find this at our website, which is www.brevardschoolsfoundation.org, and from there they can link out. So the Bids for Kids auction, I'd like to make folks aware of that. That's going on now. And on December 2nd, we've got our Run for the Future 5K. Okay. That's going to be here in Viera. That's at 4 o'clock in the afternoon, so 4 o'clock on December 2nd. That's for the Take Stock in Children program to benefit that. In January, our big event is our Applauding Brevard's Champions award ceremony, or ABC Awards. This is where we take the opportunity to honor our teachers of the year, our volunteers, our staff of the year. We do it at the King Center every year. It's a major event, and we're going to be hosting that in January.
I think I'm emceeing.
You're
that this year.
emceeing, that's right, and it's very entertaining. You will do a great job. Dr. Blackman was there last year and did a great job for his part as well, and so we're looking forward to seeing you at the ABC Awards. And then 2 other things coming up. The Florida Prepaid Scholarship. So even though this isn't a Brevard Schools Foundation program, I just want to make people aware that right now, if you purchase a Florida Prepaid Scholarship, 2 things can happen right now in the month of November. You get a discount, and you can go online, you can see that discount code, and you are entered for a drawing or a sweepstakes to win free education. So they'll give you a plan for free. So if you're interested in Florida Prepaid, this is the time to do it. You get a discount, and you get that chance to win. And then lastly, I just want to announce a new program for people who want to come in and be involved with our schools. I've talked a little bit about mentoring through Take Stock. We talked about corporate and private philanthropy to the foundation. for people who are committed and know they want to give for multiple years and create something sustainable for our schools, we have a new society called the Champions for Children Society. And it's a little bit of a refactoring of some work that we had done back 30 years ago for the 1987 Society. And it's a multi-year giving society. So it's for people in our community who know they want to give year after year and they want to make that multi-year commitment. And we're going to be announcing some fairly significant investments around the end of the month for people who've participated. And then lastly, I'd like to put a plug in just for the greater good. This is not a foundation plug, but for the greater good of the community. In January, we're getting a visit from a man named Chuck Loring, who he's a national speaker for good governance, fundraising, and board development. And if anyone who's a viewer of your show is interested in good governance, if they are a part of a nonprofit or on a board, I encourage them to find Chuck Loring. It's being presented by Lead Brevard. I will invite all of the board of Brevard Schools Foundation to come. And I've seen him many times myself. I'll come back again. It's that good. And that's the kind of capacity building across the board in Brevard that helps all of us. If we learn how to do our governance well, then that benefits everyone.
I am surprised how many different organizations would count as the type of group that needs governance. I mean, your typical high school booster club,
Yep.
if they're a nonprofit, has bylaws and ways that they need to comport themselves and ways to maintain public trust and comply. It's really something that I think a lot more people need than maybe realize.
Well, and I think if you come to a program, I'm going to just use Chuck's as an example because it's really the best thing we have going. He's come year after year. He's been retired for a while, but he keeps coming out of retirement to come back to Brevard, and we really appreciate that. And we appreciate Lead Brevard, and prior, I think the Community Foundation of Brevard was involved as well to bring him here. But the point, if people go, they learn these skills, and it's taught in a way that's easy for you to then to teach to others and for you to walk the talk and to talk back to your own boards or groups. And you get better at what you do. So if you're a booster club, you boost better, you raise more, you bring in better people. And it's just by doing these things that, unless we're professionals at this, and most of us aren't,
Right.
Most of us don't do that for a living, then we don't know the best way to do this. So it's important to have someone come in who knows this, who does this for a living. And a lot of organizations in the community, from We Venture to Brevard Achievement Center to others, I see them year after year at Chuck Loring, and those are organizations that are on their way up. They're doing good work that's getting national recognition, and things like this are a part of that.
Mike LaFortune, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
Good luck with the foundation.
Thank you for having me.
Well, that's our program. My thanks to Community Credit Union for sponsoring Brevard Watch, including our advertising and local media to reach more viewers. A big thanks to our guest today, Mike LaFortune, a business development coach and chairman of the Brevard Schools Foundation. Our producer, editor, and drone pilot is Mike Francisco. I'm Matt Reed. See you next time on Brevard Watch.
Take the BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card anywhere, anyplace. Show your school spirit every time you use your card. Get your favorite BPS CCU High School Mascot debit card today by visiting any CCU branch. Learn more at ccuflorida.org/spirit.